Welcome back to Tech Talks from Commercial Baking. I'm your host, Maddie Lambert. In this episode, sponsored by Kubota Brabender Technologie, I'm speaking with Grant Ohms, Strategic Account Manager, and Bill Humphreys, Senior Technical Support Specialist, and we are discussing the benefits of automation and batching systems. Grant, Bill, thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning, Maddie. Thanks for having us.
Yes, good morning, Maddie. Pleasure to be here.
Well, let's dive right in. So, batching is one of the many steps of baking that's been around for generations, but it hasn't really been extensively talked about or questioned before. And modern baking requires modern technology. So, Grant, I want to start with you. What do you think should guide the current conversation around batching?
Thank you, Maddie. But first, we'd like to emphasize, the multiple or many dry ingredients being delivered to a downstream batch process. We know as a dry ingredient delivery metering specialist that there have been many things that have occurred over generations that make this extremely repeatable and reliable. What we're hearing from our baking and snack, and to use the term generically, food manufacturers, is that they're looking at more than what they've looked at in the past, and that is solutions to assist with micro ingredient makeup or pre-weighing or kitting of the dry ingredients that come together that are typically referred to as micros.
And we also see that bakers can't afford to waste a batch, and they also can't afford to alienate existing customers if there are any problems. So, can you tell me, why is there more of a chance for process breakdown when it comes to manual batching?
Excellent question. And we know there's a lot going on in the batching kitchen. The amount of time to get things done, if anything, hasn't gotten extended, it's become reduced. So the review of an automated solution would start with what micro ingredient requires the highest level of plus or minus performance and or can negatively affect the batch if too much or too little is used. Identifying these ingredients versus everything, right? We want to make sure our message today is clear. We know automating everything is never going to be a solution that's practical. So what we're just trying to do is reflect on what we've been hearing from the baker. We know that there's a certain number of ingredients that probably are going to get that attention more than ever. And then simply what happens from a result of that is using automation tightens up that process, but not as an entirety or a whole for every single dry ingredient that's being used. Just more of we're not automated. We haven't automated these dry ingredients, but we'd like to sure talk to someone about how we could go about doing that.
And that's really interesting. But okay, I want to stop here because we have to talk about the elephant in the room. We're talking about batching in terms of large scale operations, but of course, we have to consider the bakers that, maybe they have shorter production runs. And so, can you provide some clarity on the perception that automated batching only makes sense in high volume operations?
Sure. And we really enjoy how these questions are being unpacked because they continue to land on what we're finding. Someone wants to get into automating of what they traditionally do by hand or manually. And what they want to improve is they want to improve on the plus or minus accuracy, the plus or minus repeatability, and the data that tracks that backs it up. So whether you're a small or a large manufacturer, we're finding this question is coming from both segments of the industry. We want to do something that we're not doing right now, and that's automate. And how do we get there without becoming unpractical and unaffordable? So that we have found, Maddie, resonates with whatever the manufacturer is and what they're trying to accomplish. Everyone has that same question mark.
There's not a necessity to do the entire system. It could be that an operator is putting in the major ingredients into the process, and while they're doing that, the minors or the micros could be batched automatically or into the system at the same time, which certainly leads to a benefit of time for sure, and traceability. I think is a very important issue.
It's a big question and it's a big interest, and there's sometimes the understanding that this is going to get expensive, this is going to get complicated, and I'm not saying it can't go into those places, but what we try and do is feeder experts. We start with what can we help you out with, and then we start talking more about all of the things that you just mentioned and Bill just complimented, that traceability and tracking is really what we see the client wanting, that evidence to support what happened, when it happened, and what type of plus or minus was being achieved at that time.
Mhm. I love that you said it doesn't have to be an all or nothing scenario. These bakeries can kind of dip their feet in a little bit with automation and see what works and what doesn't. And Kubota Brabender will be there. And that perfectly leads into my next question because I want to still talk about those smaller capacity bakeries. So, Bill, how does Kubota Brabender support bakeries with lower capacities and more frequent changeovers?
For a small bakery, definitely partial automation, I think, is the way to go. There needs to be a comfort level with the baker that changing this process from the hundreds of years that you've been doing this by hand and being able to automate at least part of it, I think is going to be a huge benefit to the baker, where they can again work simultaneously to perform the functions that they need to do, partially automated, maybe partially not, but the flexibility is there for them.
And it's like the choice is theirs, really, because if they come to Kubota Broadbender with a problem, you guys are providing the solutions, or you're introducing them to levels of automation that is new for a manual task. It's been manual for generations.
Yeah, we're really excited about it as well, Maddie. We just didn't invent this. We've really worked to identify it and not based on a gut instinct. We work with a lot of different types of manufacturers that support the industry, and we do hear this is a common concern and an interest that people are looking for someone like us as a feeder specialist to talk to them about.
And no matter the scale of the bakery, no one operation is going to be immune to these issues or challenges when it comes to batching. So, how I want to talk about how does Kubota Brabender work with your customers to meet their specific ingredient needs and then also help them troubleshoot whatever challenges may come up?
A short answer to that is we're listening, Maddie. We definitely know the importance of listening to the client wants to come over to that automation conversation, as Bill mentioned, and maybe at a certain comfort zone to get there. So we're listening. And as we mentioned, the baker is typically looking to achieve an improvement within efficiency, improving the operation or process, reflecting a return on investment, accuracy, the micro ingredients, and often potent ingredients have such an influence on what is comes together as a final product. So that accuracy and that traceability, as Bill mentioned, the importance of our equipment providing data that can be collected and reviewed at any point after is what we are is where we typically start.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to point out with automation, there is positive feedback with an automated batching system. You can be notified if there's an error in the batch. You can be notified if the batch is short of its set point goal, if it's exceeded its set point goal, and the operator still has a very big influence to whether they can continue with that or it has to be canceled. It's good to have, even though there's automation, there is still input available to make decisions on the result of what's happening.
So you're not just offering automation solutions, you're offering real-time data and feedback on process improvement and where potential breakdowns could happen in the future.
Yes. And I mean, we have our batching systems give the ability to have tight tolerances, but those tolerances can also be specified for underages and overages, where you can say, I don't want to be below, let's say, our 1 pound batch set point, but I can afford to be slightly over. And you have that flexibility to be able to input that information into the system and get the feedback.
You know, when the words automation and flexibility can coexist in the same operation, I'm sure you're going to make a baker very, very happy. Well, I just have one more question for you guys. So, Can you tell me the best way a baker could get in touch with Kubota Brabender to learn more about automating batching systems?
Excellent question. And our email would be excellent to if we can highlight that on this Tech Talk. My email address, Bill's email address, easy to get to us. Our global way to communicate with us is through our sales at Kubota, Kubota hyphen BTCA for BrabenderTechnologie.com. So that website, our website, that email, generic sales email, or either one of our email personal addresses will be the best way to make contact.
Yeah, we're happy to help. We do have a lot of experience. We are a feeder manufacturer. That's all we do, and this is what we're best at. So we're happy to get with bakers, big and small. I'm sure we can help them.
I'm sure you can too. And I cannot thank you guys enough for sitting down and talking with me today. It was really fun for me to learn more about this sector of the industry and how automation is starting to enter the chat, as the kids say.